Welcome to The Intentional Way, where literally every moment is a step towards purposeful living. I'm Bryan Hatch, here to explore the power of intention with you. Learn from our guests who embody intentionality. I'm glad you're here with me. Let's get started. Welcome to another episode of The Intentional Way. I'm your host, Bryan Hatch. And as always, I'm really excited for the episode. I'm really excited to have our guest on today. Our guest is Jodi Daniels, and she is a special person that's working on a lot of things that I think you might find interesting. If you ever wondered why a company has your information or how they got it or why they're emailing you or why they're texting you, you don't remember why, we're going to get into some really fun things. This is a personal but also business space that I love to be in. But Jodi, she runs a consulting firm called Red Clover Advisors, where she consults with privacy and all kinds of data security, all kinds of fun stuff. And I'm excited for her to share her knowledge and wisdom being in the intentional way. So welcome to the show, Jodi.
Well, I'm so glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. One of my first questions I love to get into, because we're going to get into all the nuts and bolts of stuff that you love and do, but also I want to introduce the audience to you. So Jodi, while my description of you is what we know of each other and what I know of you, what is something interesting that an audience wouldn't know or couldn't find about you online?
Well, my favorite food is chocolate chip cookies. So
All right.
you might find that because I did talk about it a decent amount. It's one of the
Okay.
things that most people will learn about me pretty quickly.
Okay. So tell us, where are we going to find these amazing chocolate chip cookies? Because they're not all created equal.
They are not all created equal. I'm a proud chocolate chip cookie snob. So the reality is I actually can't eat them the same way anymore. I'm now gluten and dairy free. So I'm continuously on a quest, if I'm totally honest, for those. There's a really amazing bakery in New York City called Modern Bread, and they do ship, which is quite lovely. But my original favorite for all normal chocolate chip cookie eaters would be Mike's Pastry Shop in the North End in Boston.
Oh, I've been to Mike's Pastries.
Yes.
Oh, they're
the
so
ones.
good.
They're huge. They're delicious. They're thick. They're yummy. If you're listening and you can go get one, I highly encourage it. And then you can remind me how delicious it is.
And for all those that can't be in Boston right now, we're going to have to find another way. So we will do so. But that's interesting. Dairy and gluten-free cookies are hard to come by, especially ones that are delicious, although there are many people making great treats nowadays.
There are. And my options are very plentiful. I'm just very picky because there's just so many parts to cookies. But actually, I had an amazing cookie cake for my birthday recently here in Atlanta, and that was quite delicious. So I'm going to have to go back to that restaurant and then have it a bit more.
A cookie cake. Now you have me intrigued, but I think we could talk about cookies for quite some time.
My favorite food. I mean, we could discuss this all day long. We don't need to talk about privacy and marketing, even though it includes cookies, because it's really my favorite things.
That's awesome. Wonderful. Well, a warm chocolate chip cookie is one of my favorites as well. It's just like something you can't pass up at all. So Jodi, as we dive into the intentional way, we're all about intentional living, doing things in an intentional way as opposed to the default way. So tell me where that aligns for you in your profession and what you do.
Well, we're here to help make privacy simple. The reality is what we're really doing is helping companies comply with privacy laws. And they can be really complicated. If anyone listening has ever had to try and comply with a tax law or an HR law before, you probably are familiar with those are complicated. And you typically need some help to figure that out. The same is happening in the privacy space. It kind of started with the EU. And speaking of cookies, these little cookie banners popped up everywhere.
Oh, yeah.
Fun fact, we didn't actually need them in the US. It's a whole nother story. But it started with the EU privacy law called GDPR that became effective May 2018. Then we fast forward and California passed a law and it became effective in January of 2020. And then it's been a cascade of privacy laws here in the US for sure, and then globally as well. What we're doing is trying to just figure out, what do I actually have to do? What one company needs to do compared to what another company needs to do is not the same. So my first piece of advice is don't go copy who you think is doing it right, because what they're doing might not be the same thing of what you need to do. And then that spirit of being intentional, we're really trying to be practical for each company and do what is appropriate and right-sized for them.
Okay. So when I look at all those things, and some people might not understand GDPR, they might not understand all those things, but it is those banners that pop up. It is the compliance laws or regulations that businesses have to should be complying with in order to not get fined or have a big bullseye on the back with the FTC, right? Then take us into this. How do we go about it in a way that is right sized? I would venture to say I'm included in this, although I have some insight because of my profession. I copy and paste some of the other things I've seen other people do because I don't really want to deal with all of the headaches. But tell us how we do it right sized, how we do it the right way.
The very first part is these laws are based on where your customers or prospects are. And then there's two spots for where employees are. Your employees, and if you're in the B2B space, your prospects and customers are going to be covered if you're in Europe or the UK and many other global regions. And if you're in California and in a few potential places in Canada. But if we just make it really easy between the US and the EU, UK, which is an often compared area, if you have employees, they're covered. If you're in the B2B space, your customers and prospects are covered. If you're in the B2C space, then consumers are covered in a number of different states here in the US. It's kind of continuously evolving. It's why I'm not listing them all. And then globally, everyone includes consumers. Some of the differences. Let's say you are US based and you're selling an e-commerce site globally. And Susie in the UK comes to your site. You could just have one Susie. You are in scope. There's no thresholds. There's no minimums really outside the US. What we tend to do here in the US is we say, well, you're a certain size company. And in privacy, some laws do size by revenue, and some companies do size by the number of records. So the very first thing you need to do is understand where are your customers and prospects from, not where you are based, but where your customers and prospects are from. I've always joked you could be having a drink in Tahiti with an amazing blog that's global, and you have to comply with the global laws like GDPR, even though you're not. From there, that's number one. Are you in scope or not? Then you have to think about, okay, you know what? I'm too small. Maybe you've decided I went through this analysis and you've concluded I'm so small. No, I don't meet those requirements. Well, then you have to say, who are your competitors? And what are they doing? Here's where looking at your competitors is a good idea. Because some of your bigger competitors might be needing to comply. And see, here's the thing. The average person has no idea about any of these laws, which is actually how we got to the cookie banner situation. Because everyone just kept seeing everybody else who said, well, you're doing that, so I should do that. And you're doing that, so I should do this. And now what's happened is customers have this expectation, even if you might be too small. Which brings me to the how do you actually right size? The very first thing you need to do is actually figure out what kind of data you have. Literally take out a piece of paper and think about, okay, I collect names, I collect emails. Do you place orders on your site? What kind of systems do you use? A lot of times people go by the system first. I use HubSpot, I use Shopify, I use Klaviyo, and they go and they list all the systems. And you can do that, but I'm going to make you go further because I need you to understand the kind of data actually in the systems and then the why you're actually collecting it and using it, and then who else you're sharing it with. So imagine you have your big piece of paper, your big fancy Excel chart, Google Doc, whatever you want, but you need to kind of understand what you have because those are the pieces that then start to determine how you actually even write a privacy notice. Do you even have the right tags and pixels firing on your site to determine if you need a cookie banner? Those are going to be your very first steps that you need to be able to do.
So obviously, depending on what kind of data I'm collecting, if I'm tracking their activity on my website, the question mark is, how does the consumer know if I'm doing those things? If I have a pixel for ad campaigns on my website, how would a common consumer know? Because, and the reason for my question comes because I feel like I've experienced with some of my colleagues that they've been sued or had some kind of an interesting scenario with some, what looks to me like a fringe case. I don't understand how that could have base here, but they get in trouble, or so that kind of worries me or worries other business owners that you think I'm not as big as them or I'm not doing what they're doing, but I don't want to get sued for something like that. So tell me a little more about that.
That's a great question. And it brings up something that's ancillary to this entire privacy law situation, which are a variety of what is known in the privacy industry as pixel litigation. So pick your tag, your pixel, I know technically the definition might be different, but for our conversation, they're pretty much the same. So imagine you have all those out there. What's happening is you have plaintiffs' attorneys, you have law firms that are going and trying to identify who's doing it wrong or who's doing it where we can take older privacy laws, things like wiretapping laws, and we're saying that violates this wiretapping law that you have out there. And we're going to have a lawsuit against you. And what most people end up doing is they have to then settle. Well, who makes all the money? The law firm just is happy to settle. And the company had to give up all this money, but it was still less expensive than having to go to a trial. So they're doing it under these really old laws. The idea being wiretapping means that you can listen and you're following. If I have a pixel and you never asked me, could you put that there, but you just put it there, you send data off to some third-party company, you are listening and share my data. And that's where the lawsuit comes in. That's just one example. They are showing up in chatbots. So people who have little chatbots that come up, if that chatbot is a third-party company, right away, it looks like you sent it to the chatbot company. An easy solution now, disclaimer, I'm not a privacy attorney. I'm not providing legal advice. One of the common ways that I do see people do this in the chatbot is they'll have powered by, fill in the blank, chatbot name. Information entered here is going to this chatbot company with their privacy notice. So some little single sentence that is really clear, Jodi, when you use this chatbot, you're giving the chatbot the information. Has been one of the ways a lot of companies are mitigating that. Now you ask, how does anyone know? There are different tools. The most common, and everyone here can go get it really easily and for free, and it's kind of fun, is a tool called Ghostery. It's a little extension, great Chrome extension. I'm sure they have them on all of them.
Can you spell that?
Like ghost, and then ERY, so Ghostery.
Okay.
And you go and you get this little extension. You can then look, and it will show you, here's all the trackers that are firing on the page. Anyone can see that.
Yeah.
A plaintiff's attorney can see it. A regulator can see it. Your customers can see it. Your competitors can see it. Anyone can see from the outside really quickly and easily what is actually there. There's similar tools. There's just some other ones that are there, but that's the really most easily found one. And if you're ever on a website and notice how it's going really slowly, it's always fun to see just how many of those trackers are firing on the page, and you will see them.
Yeah. Does that include Google Analytics? I'm trying not to get too far in the weeds, but that's Google Analytics?
Well, Google Analytics will pop up as one of the pixels that is showing. And Google Analytics is kind of a really interesting one because it's a little dependent then on how you also set it up. What Google Analytics has, it's going to a third-party company, and most of those lawsuits are including analytics pixels. They're going more after the advertising pixels, if I'm honest, but they could also include the analytics pixels.
Okay.
The analytics pixels really come into play when we start thinking about the different laws, because most of those are not considered required pixels. All of us as business owners might say, well, I think it's required. I really want to know what's actually happening. Regulators might say, that's a lovely nice to have. You don't actually need that. And there's been a lot of interesting discussion in Europe about that data coming to Google and exactly what data Google's getting. And is that okay? And is that not okay? So Google Analytics is very much a hot button topic in the privacy community, for sure.
Hey, real quick, if you're enjoying this episode, please subscribe, follow, and download our episode. Your support allows us to bring more intentional guests just like this, and it means the world to us. Now, let's get back to the episode. There's so many questions that come on mind, Jodi, when you speak, because this is something that I find fascinating. But I wonder about the little guys. If a government, and I don't care where they are, tells me that I don't need data that helps my business run better, I struggle with that a little bit. I struggle with saying, if I don't know that someone's on my page, I don't need to know their name, but if I know how long people are on my page, it helps me optimize what I'm doing. So maybe I'm too far into the weeds on this, but that's a little bit of the thoughts that come to my mind.
So those are really valid concerns. The argument on the flip side, and I don't write the laws nor advocate for them. I'm like the messenger here, trying to help make it easier to understand why they're here. Let's take a Google Analytics or pick your favorite social media pixel.
Mhm.
When that fires, that third party company is using the data to figure out, wow, Jodi, you really like chocolate chip cookies.
You're
And
right.
look at all the different websites that you've gone to and all these bakeries. You must really be this. And oh, wow, you're gluten free. We're going to put you in that category. And oh, you're from Atlanta. We're going to put you here. And you do all these things. So it starts to create the profile. Now, as people who are running advertising, people like that profile. Look at me. I can make effective
Yeah.
advertising. As the purchaser, that's beneficial. As the individual, there's a profile getting created that may or may not be accurate, that then has an ecosystem around it with hundreds of companies in the middle collecting and selling all of that information. Again, maybe accurate, maybe not. Individuals don't really have a lot of full knowledge or control over all of that. And so the argument is, well, hold on. Jodi just went to the site to go browsing for shoes.
Yeah.
And now you've collected all this information and made a lot of decisions and shared it with potentially hundreds of companies. And Jodi just wanted to look at shoes. Was that okay? The last example I always give to try and kind of drive home the point, just to understand why we have these laws. And the philosophy in Europe versus the philosophy in the US are really different.
Okay.
Europe tends to be individual first, company second, meaning it's more opt in, and that's why. Compared to here in the US, it's more of a tell me and give me some choices. Let me opt out. If we were in our physical world, imagine you left your home and you're walking down the street, and I'm behind you with my little notepad. I take notice of the car you drive, how fast you're driving, what you're wearing today, all the brands that are there as well, the type of coffee you ordered at Starbucks, how long you took, then where you went to work, what kind of lunch you had, exactly what you ordered, as well as where you went and dropped your kid off or picked your kid up or the dry cleaning, the other things that you did for shopping, the gym. Imagine someone going through your entire day, the music you listened to in the car, your acts, all the buttons and how fast you were driving. If I literally had a notepad and noted every single one of those pieces, most people after 30 seconds would turn around and say, stop. But that's what we're doing in the digital world. And because it's digital and we can put it all together, we think, but look at how amazing it is. That's great. And I started in the marketing space. I get it. And I'm a business owner and I get it. We need to kind of put ourselves from the customer point of view and how would they feel? What's too creepy? And anyone walking down the street who feels someone's a little too close, everyone has turned around and said, stop, right? If you walked a little faster, you tried and went in a different direction. It's kind of the same with this data collection concept. And that's why we are where we are today.
Yeah, that helps a lot. I have to literally compartmentalize the way that I look at this, because if I look at it from a business perspective, I have opinions. And then if I look at it from a personal perspective, I have different opinions, even though I run a business, right? So I think there's a lot to it. And let's bring it back a little bit. You've shared a lot and it's been useful. And I hope that everybody's listening is finding the usefulness in it and the thought pattern here. But bring it back to intentionality. And I don't know who you want to speak to first, if it's the individual or if it is the business owner. I recognize that we have the corporations. That's maybe a third part that we're not going to get into. I don't want to get into anyways. But in those two camps, how do we get more intentional around what it is we're doing so that we can create an experience, like you said, that brings trust between businesses and consumers? So help me get there.
Let's imagine you're wanting to collect some type of piece of data from a website visitor. I want you to think about what are you asking for and put yourself in the mind of that individual and that customer. Are they going to question why are they asking for that data? Everyone here, silent answer, which is you probably have answered, I don't want to answer that when you've been given a drop-down list. And the reason why is because you didn't trust what the company was going to do. We want to be thinking about, we talk about buyer journey, customer journey, user journey. The same is going to be true here from a data point of view. What is reasonable to ask right away? And then as you continue to get to know me and you want more data, maybe that's when you keep asking me 400 other questions. Okay, maybe not 400, but hopefully everyone gets the idea, right?
Mhm.
Slight exaggeration. The idea being, though, get to know me because I might give you bad data and then you're going to make bad decisions on it. If you give me the option of I don't want to answer, I might pick that one. And I pick that because I don't trust what you're going to do with my data. If we think about, I need to understand what about you. And let's use clear language when I'm saying, here's why I need to know how much you make, what's your financial income, or here's why I need to know about your family, or here's why I need to know what your preferences are. Help the user eliminate their concern and their objection. Do that nearby when you're asking for the data. And yes, you should also have a privacy notice that covers what you're actually doing. The point of a privacy notice, yes, it's a legal document. It's also supposed to actually explain whatever it is you're doing on the site. So number one, from an intentional perspective, is think about what you're asking. Do I need to have it right now? Do I think I might need it in 2 years? Yeah, don't ask that now. Most of the laws are all around collect what you need now, but really think about the person you're asking it from, and will they be comfortable with it? Or will they feel, my very official term, it's too creepy. We don't want the too creepy version. So that would be my very first recommendation.
I'm going to ask you a little more about how, and I'll explain what I mean by how. As a business owner and in the marketing space, I've always been taught and also teach that the first thing we want to have happen when someone hits our landing page or our website is to convey a message that is purpose-driven, that makes them understand what we're up to. And I'm a little bit fighting in my head listening to you of like, all right, so instead of my super cool headline that tells them my purpose as a company, I need to have some kind of notice up there. Hey, do you want to tell me? Do you want to share this? Are you okay with me knowing this about you? I'm exaggerating on purpose, but it's still like, oh, instead of explaining who I am and how I'm here to help and to hopefully create that trust, now I feel like I'm like, oh, let's talk about the trust things instead of talking about what I do for them or how I benefit their life. So help me reconcile that a little bit.
I would significantly recommend you stick with the approach that you're used to. Who are you and why are you amazing? When you then start to ask me for me to enter information, then you want to think about what are you asking me to give you? And in that section is where you might want to consider language that's going to make me feel comfortable. And that's typically because people will then ask for more. If it's my name and my email, that's one thing. But if you ask for my phone number, a lot of people don't want to give their phone number. So why do they really need my phone number? At the very beginning, who are you? But by the time I get to a form, you should have convinced me now, okay, no, I'm interested. I'm willing to give you my data. Why do you need my phone number? As an example, if that's a data point you want, you need to convince me why that's okay.
Yeah.
But by the time I got there, I'm hopefully convinced I like you and I think you might be able to help me or solve for me, but I might not be ready for my phone. I might just be ready for the email. We're at a beginning relationship here. And it also might be depending on the service.
I love it. And it's funny because I think of, again, the intentionality, like being intentional and accomplishing what you have visioned and planned. I want to create versus the default, just the common path. I can almost hear business owners and maybe even myself respond to your question. Why do you need my phone number? And from a business perspective, it's so I can validate that you're a human and then I can validate that I can actually connect with you because email marketing, while still effective, isn't the same it was 20 years ago when you could send an email and people actually read it. Now people get hundreds of emails every day and it's like a sea of crazy. Still a great place to use as a marketing tool. So I'm thinking the default way for business owners, I need the phone number so that I have some way to connect with you because email isn't the most effective. And I can see where that's not really intentional. That's just like, if I have your phone number, it's better for me as a business owner. And what I'm hearing you say is the opposite is if I am asking for a phone number, let them know why that matters, how I'm going to use it, how I'm not going to use it as well. And maybe I'm going a little overboard, but still make it clear that this is why. And then it would make it easier for me as a consumer to give you my phone number because it feels like every site I go to now is like, hey, you want this discount? Yeah, just pop in your email. You do that. And they're like, give me your phone number. I'm like, I'm done. Because I'm like, I don't know if I care about the 10% that much. So, yeah.
That's exactly right. And if you were to think about nowadays, people are also using text so much more. And people don't like that. They don't necessarily want cold text messaging. And if you're asking for my phone number, I might be concerned because now you're just going to text me and I don't actually want those text messages. Sidebar, if any of you are actually trying to do text messaging and you're going to use any kind of automated texting tool to do it, that is opt-in. So if you ask for my phone number and want to go put me in some text tools, then math target me with any message that is an opt-in. Hopefully that's helpful.
Yeah. Can I maybe go on a slight tangent for just a moment? And maybe it's just the season, and I recognize that election season is different, that it comes around every couple of years. But here's one thing. We're talking about compliance a bit. Now that's the whole, but security compliance and to do what legally is correct, and then by building trust, right? And I find it funny, we're complying to a government that doesn't follow their own rules. I get text messages about the election that I didn't ask for in any way, shape, or form, and they're certainly not bipartisan. They're certainly not kind. It's not go vote. It's this person's evil and don't do this thing and you need to do this. And it's like, whoa, what? But they don't have to follow the same laws that I do, which is kind of crazy.
They don't. They exempted themselves from the law. So they are in scope of the law. They're not violating the law. They wrote themselves as an exception to the law. The same is true for charitable organizations. That's why they can still call you on a phone. Same thing. And I'm in a swing state, so I really feel the text message mania right now.
How can we create loopholes for ourselves? No, I'm kidding. That's not where we're going. I'll jump out of that tangent, but it was just fun because it's interesting. It's kind of a catch-22 there. Like I got to comply with the government that doesn't comply, but I get loopholes. Okay.
Yeah.
So coming back to intentionality now and building that trust, what should the intention be of a business? And then maybe carry us through that part of the conversation as well.
If you are in business to serve, which is everyone is trying to sell something, you're trying to sell a product, you're trying to sell a service. And you're like you talked about, I come to the page and here's why I'm amazing. All of that is there. The data part, you also want them to trust you on. And we talked about if you're going to ask for data, then explain why you're going to do that. The privacy notice is going to be the other place that people can look, should look. It is legally required. And if you're technically too small for any of the state laws, you mentioned in the very beginning, the Federal Trade Commission. And there's actually really old California law, which is honestly why we got to a privacy policy for every single website, because it basically captured almost everyone. And you need something at a very minimum that says, here's what I'm collecting and here's what I do with it. And here's some choices that you have. Very, very basic. The idea is you're trying to be transparent and not hide behind anything. You're not going to be successful in business if you try and say, here's what my product and service is. Oh, and then by the way, here's the 15 other things you don't get with it. No one's going to like you very much, right? That's not going to work. The same is true from a privacy point of view. We want to do right by our customers. If I think about a security angle, if you have all this data, remember earlier, I said take out a piece of paper and write down all your systems and the data that is in them. Now you need to make sure it's appropriately secured. Because the last thing you want is for you to be the reason that there's some type of data breach out there. And I assure you, as a company, even if you're small, people love small, and people around the world have nothing better to do than to try and wreak havoc on everybody else. Our data is out there, and you want to be able to protect it as best as possible. I would also say, let's kind of come to the cookie conversation in this whole cookie banner scenario. If you're going to have a cookie banner, which that's actually a very detailed and complicated conversation. If you have people in the EU and the UK, it's very simple. You need a cookie banner, and it is accept and reject. You need a button that says accept and reject and manage your cookies in the same banner. If anyone is listening and has a banner that just says, hi, we use cookies, that's okay, that's not compliant. So very intentional here. My words of wisdom is review your cookie consent solution that you have and make sure it actually works. And the last piece is literally make sure it actually works. Test it. I can't tell you how many of these we see. People put it up and they think, what? And all done. I got my accept and my reject and my manage, and that doesn't actually do anything. It doesn't actually reject anything. So that's where the worst ever.
It just carries all the cookies. I reject the cookies that you're tracking me anyways.
And it happens all the time.
Yeah.
Just like you're going to make sure you test a form, right? Does my brand new beautiful form actually work? Does my beautiful brand new email nurture sequence work? You want to test these other pieces as well.
So as a business, to build the trust is to tell people why I'm going to use your information, why that matters. And if I can communicate that in a transparent way, it ought to create trust? And tell me a little more about how do people really care? I recognize that there are people like law firms and other people, like there are like the maybe the squeaky wheel. I'm not trying to make that be a negative thing, but the people that are like in it to figure it out or to make a mess of it or whatever. But most of the people just kind of think, oh, yeah, you can track me. I don't care. You're going to do it anyways. Do people just let that go? Or the conversation we're in, being super intentional about it, is truly going to make a difference? Or is it kind of one of those things that's like, meh, out of sight, out of mind? Once I click the button, I'm not thinking about it anymore as a consumer.
Consumers really care. There's a few different interesting statistics. One is that 52% of people won't buy a product or service over privacy concerns. That's 1 in 2.
Oh, wow.
So imagine all your marketing that's out there, and half of them won't trust you.
Hmm.
There's some other statistics that are about 80% of people are really concerned with the privacy and security of their data that is with any company
Yeah.
that's out there. So for me, people really do care. Now, let's look at a couple things. We talked about email marketing. We want to get more people on our list. There's competition. How do I get people to actually open my email and stay on? And you might have people unsubscribe because you've sent them 5 emails all day long. I don't really need 5 emails about your shoes and your sales in a day. Maybe you're just a once a day kind of person. But people are making decisions whether they're going to stay or not stay. I call it the save the unsubscribe. So where does kind of that element of trust and connection and relationship fall in? Instead of having just the one click unsubscribe and it's an all or nothing, how are you letting me choose how I want to communicate with you? A preference center. So many of the email service providers today have that. Let me decide. Do you want the webinar? Do you want the podcast? Do you want the newsletter? Do you want the coupons? Do you want the women's? Do you want the kids? Whatever your area is, break it up so that I can decide. Because before it was all or nothing, and I might have been annoyed at you. See, people click the unsubscribe because they don't like your product or service, or they're annoyed and mad at you. Well, one of the ways we can try and save that, I can't fix your product or service. That's on the business side. But from a privacy point of view, I can try and help encourage, no, let's find the right piece for you. Now what happens? They sign up for what they want. They're more likely to open. They're more likely to engage. They're more likely to give you the data. You actually have more data on them because you already know what they really want, and you can tailor messaging to them. As I'm going through the sales funnel, whatever that looks like, whether it's all digital or I'm going to pick up the phone and we're going to have some kind of conversation or you physically walk in a store, whatever the experience is, the more that you're getting to know the person as the person, at the end, it's a human buying things. You're creating a relationship. The idea of like and trust. It's there for every part. The data piece is just one of those elements. It's why people pick PayPal, Amazon Wallet, Apple Pay over giving the credit card. Why? Because they feel more secure. Where else might that show up as they're engaging with you? Maybe your product is in the health space and wellness could be it. Well, what kind of questions are you asking me? And what are you going to do with that data? Or maybe you need to know a little bit about me. So can I really afford your product? Do you ask me that right away or do we have to get to know each other? If I walked in the furniture store that was high end or the Lamborghini store, do you right away just ask me how much I make to determine if I can afford your product?
Probably not.
Probably not. Right? We're going to get to know each other first. Oh, yeah, no, my friend over here had one. I thought I'd come check it out. Or, I saw a picture of it and I thought it would be cool. Then you can tell where the people are. So I want people to remember there's people that they're connecting with. We're so used to being in the digital space that we sometimes forget the human connection.
Yeah. Human connection is, I think, the zest of life. And if we forget that as business owners, that's, I think, where we start to get on shaky ground in our intentions. I love that as a component of what we want to build and what we want to create as business owners is trust with the audience that we have. Obviously, every business would say, I would love everybody to buy from me. True. But if you build trust with the right people, there is something very beautiful that happens. And so that human connection is what we're after. If we come back to that, there's nothing more powerful, in my opinion, in the business than a connection, a personal human connection with your customers as opposed to be transactional. Would you say?
I would agree. And to me, it comes up in a couple places. One, it's going to be about that data that you're asking me for. You're deciding. I mean, has anyone ever gotten an email and the targeting was so wrong? And you're thinking, wow, you really don't know me. You didn't spend any time getting to know me. And I don't trust you anymore. Forget it. You're gone. Like, decision already made. That's marketing, right? Bad information is going to lead me down that path. And just to kind of connect it to the security side, at the same time, if there's any kind of security incident, then potentially based on what's happened, I no longer am going to trust you. And we want people to be loyal. Or if you shared my information with somebody and I didn't expect to get that email from that third party, but they said, oh, I have this great partner with XYZ company. I got your email from them. Well, hold on. I didn't say that you could do that. Where I signed up for your email, and now you're the one who's going to email me about XYZ company. No, no, no. I just wanted your email. I didn't say that I wanted everything under the sun. How we're judicious with how much we're talking to people and what we're telling them is all wrapped up into this element of trust. And companies want more data. They want more information. They want to be able to target more. It's getting more complicated on those social advertising platforms. It's getting more complicated in the regular third-party advertising space. The email box is getting cluttered, which leads us back to people are craving connection and relationships. Well, the best way you're going to get that is by convincing them your product and service is the right one for them, and by using accurate data that doesn't creep them out and doesn't push them in the wrong direction.
Yeah.
And instead engages them and makes me feel, oh, wow, I want to give you more because you're going to give me something so amazingly relevant that I'm okay with that.
I think as consumers, we create our own security a little bit. I recognize we are not the ones in control of the data vaults and the big data and all that stuff. But I know when I don't trust a company, I have an email address that's not my name, and it's certainly my email, and I certainly look at it when I need to. They probably don't know if I'm a female, male, kid, grandpa. I opt in for all kinds of things with that email, and the big data has no idea what that is because I opt in for everything with that before I'm ready to trust the company. So I think that consumers find ways, whether it's that or other ways, to mitigate or put their own wall up around their data so that they're not exposed so much, I think. Would you agree?
And there's a lot of people that will do that for sure. And they're doing it because they've been burned. They don't trust what's actually happening. For you to move over, so if you gave them the fake email or the secondary or tertiary one, then what will it take for you to trust them and give more data? Probably dependent on how they use the first set of data and how you believe in the product or service you received overall. Then you're willing, to move upstream.
Yeah, that happens quite commonly with multiple businesses that I know that will get one email on the front end, and then when they buy, we get a different email, and then we have to match it up and all kinds of fun stuff. After the fact, we realize, oh, this is the same name, same city, whatever the case is after the fact because they use that separate email.
Right. So the idea being, kind of to your question of, well, do people care? They do. And how they're doing it is they're using different emails, they're using VPNs, they're going to different browser settings, they're doing different phone numbers. They're doing a lot of different steps because of the situation that we're in. And then it's about building that relationship, and they might never change it or they might ultimately change it. But people do care, for sure.
Yeah, I've asked those questions, but I definitely believe, like you, that people definitely care. They just have different ways to respond to that so that they don't put themselves out there too far or have their data get out there. I just don't know that people are actually thinking the words like, I don't want to give this. Maybe they are saying, I'm reconciling the language of a business owner via consumer as well.
People think of it as the personal information. I think businesses tend to use the data, and regular people tend to say my information. I don't want my information to be out there.
Makes sense. And it feels like that data is more and more used against us than it is for us. Although I think there's something to be said about a business that uses it the right way can target their audience in a way that makes them feel comfortable, makes the consumer feel comfortable without crossing that bar. Like you said, if someone's following you around, noting everything you do, and then if they've done that for 3 weeks and then you wake up and they say, hey, are you going to wear the brand name sweater today? You're like, what? Well, I didn't know that you knew that about me. So that's where it gets kind of super weird for a consumer, I think.
Yes. And a lot of people will use the voice situation. I was talking about XYZ and then proof, I have an ad for it. Really? It was listening. And some people have accepted that. Some people have said, no, that's not okay. I'm going to go turn off all my settings. And then other people have said, I'm not okay with that. And I don't like that. I'm unhappy that that has happened and block.
Yeah.
That's a pretty common one that people tend to realize, gosh, how did that happen?
Yeah. Here's an interesting question, Jodi. Do you feel like ever we're going to get to a point where data is so overwhelming and so all-consuming? I mean, there's talk about implanting chips and all kinds of fun stuff that helps this and that and the other. Are we ever going to get to a place where the consumers say, I'm done? Like, this is more and more invasive. This is more and more exclusive, or you're cutting into my actual privacy here. I recognize there are people that care, but is there ever going to be a point where it's like altogether a stop? Like, we got to stop this, or do you think it's not ever going to come that way?
That's an interesting question. I think it's probably dependent on the situation. When we think about chips and neural implants, there is so many questions that I have when it comes to that. And to me, that's insanely
Yeah.
scary. Those are my very personal thoughts. Who is going to have that information? I don't think I'd ever trust anyone. And actually, you're having that now with some of the genetic companies that are out there. It's a private company. Some of that data has been breached. That some of those companies have been sold. And there are people who are really interested because they wanted the information, but then really concerned now what's actually going to happen with that data. And that's really personal data. I think when it comes to some of the kind of common digital marketing-esque that we're here, people want notice, they want control. We're going to kind of swim in this interesting privacy circle for a while. I think when you start to get to more sensitive data, biometric data, health data, kind of even neural data would be considered health data. So location data, are you tracking literally what I'm actually doing in my car? People don't like that. They put the more cameras everywhere where there's a camera and you can see in. People don't like that. I think in any of those scenarios, if you were to find someone to be so egregious, I do believe you'd have a bit of a tidal wave where people would really start to ask the questions and try and understand more. I think in our common marketing circles right now, with trying to capture data, there are certainly people who don't like it, certainly people who have a lot of concerns. I think as long as we have the ability to choose, unsubscribe, opt out, delete, stop, we're going to be there for a while. What I will say is globally, it tends to be more of I have to have the right ability to use it first. And in the US, it tends to be I can still use it any way I want, and then I can opt out. Where we are seeing the intersection is with the use of AI. And depending on how that data would be used, you might end up more a little bit with your, no more, kind of that harder stance. You're seeing that, maybe not marketing, but you're seeing it more, for example, evaluating employment applications. People are very concerned. So when it comes to any kind of discrimination, if maybe you were to collect information about me and charge me such an egregious amount versus someone else over here, that could start to show up. And that is advertising and marketing and pricing all kind of blended in together.
Well, Jodi, this has been fascinating. I've enjoyed our conversation. There's so much to glean in the intention of a business owner around data, around securing that data and building trust with the consumer. And then also from the consumer side, looking at businesses and how do you want them to use your information. So Jodi, kind of as we conclude our episode here, tell me, is there anything else we've left out that definitely needs to be spoken before we close our conversation?
I would say probably not that we haven't said it, but just to kind of wrap it all up, which is going back to this idea that people are buying from a company, but ultimately it's a person. And they're buying the product or service because they believe that it's going to solve this amazing need or want that they have. And we want to be able to make that relationship right. The data we collect on them, the personal information, the engagement that we have is a part of that entire process. And people will likely question it when it's too creepy. It was a terrible experience with you. And that is how, from a privacy point of view and trust, I feel like we wrap it together. There are definitely compliance elements to get right. Tell people what you're doing, make it easy to understand what's actually happening. Don't ask for things that are going to make them scratch their head. Build the relationship first. And the last part I would say is to lead with trust. You have to put yourself as the customer through your entire journey, just like you're going to do on your website. And your entire experience, do it from a privacy angle as well.
Yeah. And for me, as I look at it, I think it's very uncommon for us to ask other people, whether it be our consumers, our friends and family, or colleagues, what's the experience like of being around me? And if we think about it from a business perspective, like what do my consumers actually experience by being close to my company? And if we look at that lens and we do all we can to get the data back in, or at least the feedback in a way that says, oh, this is my experience being around you as a company. And if you like that, that's good. If it's trusted, if it's a good relationship, that's good. But if you find any friction, if you find any consumers that are like, yeah, I feel like you're like asking for too much, or I feel like, why do you need my information? Then it's time to look at that in a different way. Get clear about it. Be intentional about how you're using data so that your consumers have your trust, want to open your emails, want to open your text messages, want to get your phone calls. And then from there, you actually have a human connection, because business is still that way. I recognize that it can be transactional. I recognize that's how it is in a lot of ways, but people do crave that connection. And if you're one of those companies that does it, they're going to fall in love with you.
100% agree. Well said.
Jodi, thank you so much for being here on this episode. It's been fun, and I can't wait to hear the feedback from our audience.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for joining us on The Intentional Way. I'm Bryan Hatch, and it's been a true privilege to share this time with you. If today's episode has inspired you in any way, shape, or form, please subscribe, follow, and download our episodes. Your support not only helps us grow, it also enables us to bring more insightful conversations and exceptional guests right to you. Living intentionally begins with a single step, yours. So let's make the most of it. Until next time, seek intention by being completely present.